Hey, 42 here. In a few minutes, I'll tell you why this bird could be the secret to unlocking skills you never thought you had. What if you could wake up tomorrow and play the piano, despite never having touched a musical instrument? What if you could suddenly paint like Da Vinci, despite never having put brush to canvas? In the very near future, this, and much more, might be possible. And if you stick around until the end, you'll find out exactly why that is, and what a small Australian bird has to do with it all. But first, let me ask you a question. Who do you think drew this magnificent geometric painting? To answer that, we need to go back to 2002 on the street outside a karaoke bar in Tacoma, Washington. A humble furniture salesman named Jason Paget had just enjoyed a few drinks and was leaving the bar when it hit him. A blow to the back of the head. Paget was tragically mugged and violently beaten. Jason Paget was an ordinary man, until suddenly he wasn't. Before the mugging, he had zero interest in art, maths, or geometry. He was a regular guy with two main attributes: a brown belt in karate, and he could sell the holy shite out of a reasonably priced futon. After the mugging, however, Paget woke up as though he'd been plugged into the Matrix, and Tank had chosen the maths genius floppy disk to upload to his brain. Suddenly, Paget saw the world in a very different light, literally. He had developed synesthesia, a condition where people see the world through other senses other than sight, such as smell, touch, or colour. In Paget's case, he started to see the world through the lens of geometry. Everywhere he looked, he saw angles, prisms, light rays, and tangents. What's more, he began drawing the most beautifully intricate geometric images entirely by hand. His artwork has been widely celebrated, and Paget is now also a skilled mathematician. But most remarkably of all, when asked, he said he viewed the violent mugging as a gift. What a man. Paget is an example of one of the two types of savant. Most savants are congenital savants, which means they are born with the syndrome and exhibit incredible mental feats from childhood. Paget, however, is the second kind, an acquired savant. Someone who acquired savant syndrome later in life, usually following a brain injury. Savants are often featured in documentaries and films, but have you actually ever met one in real life? I'm willing to bet the answer is no, because savant syndrome is rare, like really, really rare. About 1 in 100 children are diagnosed with autism. And of those, savant syndrome only presents in 1 in 1,000 cases. So it's estimated that anywhere from 1 in 100,000 to 1 in 1 million people are savants. And that's congenital savants. Acquired savant syndrome is rarer still. There are fewer than 50 cases in the entire world. Oh, and there's also a super duper special category of savants within savants. They're called mega savants, and there are only a handful that have been identified throughout recorded history. The most famous is Kim Peek, but you probably know him as Rain Man. Contrary to popular belief, Kim Peek wasn't actually autistic. He had a rarer condition called FG syndrome, which is a slightly different mental disability. But that certainly didn't hold back Peek from reaching the peak of human performance. Peek's main attribute was his uncanny photographic memory. He could accurately recall the contents of at least 12,000 books. What's more, he would read a book by using his left eye to scan the left page, whilst his right eye simultaneously read the right page. Despite reading 2 pages at the same time, he still remembered every single detail. Peek could also provide driving directions between almost any 2 cities in the world, and he was able to confidently answer which day of the week it was on any given date in history. In fact, calendar calculations such as this are a very common theme among savants. For some unknown reason, it's a talent that many of them exhibit. Others, such as Leslie Lemke, have talent in the musical realm. Despite sadly not being able to feed himself or walk properly, Lemke could listen to any piece of music just once and then perfectly recite it on the piano. from Mozart to Tchaikovsky. Yet, he'd never had any musical training. Then there's the incredible Daniel Tammet, who can recite every digit of pi to 22,514 decimal places. Alonzo Clemens is able to see any animal just once, then, within a few hours, sculpt an exact and highly detailed replica using only his bare hands. Stephen Wiltshire is known as the human camera because he can draw an incredibly accurate and highly detailed cityscape after glimpsing a city just once. He has drawn incredible panoramas of London, New York, Tokyo, and many more. It's not yet fully understood what causes savant syndrome, but especially in the case of those who acquire it, it's believed that compensatory mechanics are at play. When one part of the brain is damaged, another part may develop in an extraordinary way to compensate, linking previously unlinked brain regions that could unlock superhuman memory, mathematical ability, or artistic talent. Brain scans of some savants show highly unusual connections and activity patterns that just aren't seen in the general public. This makes sense because the brain is extremely plastic. It can rewire itself over our lifetimes to adapt to our environment, what we learn, and, yes, to compensate for injuries. Imagine the brain a little like a river. Thoughts and ideas bubble up from the source, and they need to find a way to get processed by a different part of the brain. And just as water always finds the path of least resistance in its inevitable torrent towards the sea, thoughts try to find the most efficient way to get actioned in the brain. So if a brain injury or a congenital learning or development disability, such as autism, blocks a certain pathway, in some cases the brain will engineer a brand new pathway or expand existing pathways so they have more bandwidth. Just like a river cutting through a new section of mountain because of a boulder blocking its original path. And with some luck, it might just be that this new pathway is significantly more efficient than the pre-existing one, if one existed at all. Whereas before, let's say pre-injury, the brain might have taken windy country lanes to recall a memory or attempt to play the piano, post-injury the brain could have built a shiny new motorway, connecting two parts of the brain that make recalling those memories or playing the piano considerably easier and faster for the individual to master. But naturally, all of this poses an exciting question. If savants prove that the brain can create these new connections, seemingly at random, to unlock insane new abilities, why can't we just instruct the brain to create them at our whim, foregoing the really unpleasant brain injury step? Admittedly, that sounds rather ambitious. However, if you stick with me, I'll tell you why it's not as far-fetched as you might think. But first, I want to tell you about that bird. Calm down, it's not that kind of channel. I'm talking about the feathery kind, specifically the zebrafinch. Zebrafinch have a very specific song that they all share. Usually they learn it from their parents and peers during their early years. But something truly extraordinary happens when you disrupt that development. When a zebrafinch is raised in complete isolation from birth, it will still develop the ability to sing its unique song, despite never having heard it from another finch. It's like you waking up one day and being able to perfectly execute a choreographed dance to Taylor Swift's Shake It Off, without ever once having listened to terrible pop music in your life. You see, scientists believe the basic structure of this song is hard-coded into a zebrafinch's genealogy. Which makes me think, what if there are similar skills that are hard-coded into our genes? Passed down through countless generations. It could be no coincidence that music and art are two of the most commonly presenting abilities in savants. These have both been intrinsically woven into the thread of human history since the dawn of time. We have always made music and we have always made art. Your genes contain the footprints of millions of your ancestors, and a very high number of those ancestors will have been talented with a paintbrush, pencil, or some random stone or wood-based musical instrument. Could these traces of genius be hard-coded deep within your DNA? Now, this is all extremely theoretical, but it does seem a bit strange that post-injury, individuals can suddenly play advanced piano pieces without spending the hundreds of hours typically required to do so. It suggests that the ability to perform such a complex, intricate, and highly skilled feat was somehow lying dormant within that person. And perhaps the same skill and many others could be lying dormant in all of us, just like the song of the zebrafinch. So obviously the question arises, how do we purposely unlock these skills? There are emerging technologies that could be adapted to that very task. One is transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS. In TMS, the patient has a coil attached to his head and magnetic pulses are passed through the brain to temporarily alter brain activity. It's typically used to treat depressive disorder or OCD, but it could, at least theoretically, be adapted to induce savant-like qualities on demand. Another option is deep brain stimulation. It's similar to TMS in that electric pulses are methodically applied to the brain, except a physical pacemaker-like device is inserted into the cranium to deliver the treatment in a more permanent and targeted manner. It's typically used to treat epilepsy and Parkinson's disease, but with more research, it could be adapted to induce savant-like connections in the brain to unlock latent talents in some individuals, or perhaps increase the capability of one's memory. You could essentially become Rain Man without having to fart in a single phone box. Looking into the far future, it's more likely that gene editing or nanotechnology will be used to edit our brain structure. In doing so, we might one day be able to edit our brains in a computer in a way that enhances existing talents or unlocks new ones. Then upload this new version to our brains, Matrix style. Obviously, first we need to fully understand how the brain works, which we currently don't. The idea of using gene editing or other tech to modify our thought patterns seems like pure science fiction. But then again, science fiction becoming science reality seems to have become a bit of a trend of late, so you never know. Although it's much more likely that instead of trying to modify our brains in a sort of natural way to induce better memory or superhuman maths abilities, we will instead choose to augment our brains with technology, such as computer chip implants. Whatever the future holds though, just remember how incredible it is that we don't have to wait for it to arrive, because we can marvel at the remarkable savants out there right now that show us all what the human brain is truly capable of. And you know what, it's nice to know that when hurdles are put in our way, sometimes the brain and the body are both capable of flying right over them and ascending to seemingly impossible heights. Thanks for watching. Just a quick word to say that I couldn't make these videos without the support of my Patreon members. Consider joining the exclusive 42 Discord community by supporting me on Patreon. It's a great place to discuss my videos with like-minded individuals and myself. The link's in the description, but if you don't want to, or you can't join my Patreon, then please don't worry. A simple like or comment to say thanks would also put a huge smile on my face. Thank you.